the rust has found a way through. So that's what you get when you have a lot of porous areas that you can't really fill in with paint and filler and or weld or primer paint. The rust finds its way. This is only after about 3 weeks of really heavy raining, as indicated. I wasn't here when it rained, but as indicated by the puddles, water on the road, and the full level of, well, not quite full, it's about 70% water level. So you can even see some rust breaking its way through that hinge there, and see that's exposed. These hinges aren't the expensive galvanized one, they're just straight up steel, so they will rust pretty easily. But holding this bolt here, see this wood, it's exposed here, this bolt, I painted it there, but you know what, that wood is basically what's keeping that bolt tight there. But it should be pretty solid in there. It's right rammed in that concrete, bolted on here. But one thing I can do is weld another bar on this side, which I probably want to do anyway for a door frame. There's still a door frame here. But anyway, for another day. Alright, so we're fabricating this other one. We've got 2 corner right degree angle pieces that we're gonna weld together and get our square frame. And now we're just gonna weld the 2 corners together. So. Okay, so yeah, you heard me getting that generator started. It's a traditional coil type of starter engine. It brings me back to the old days of being 12, 13, 14 years old. Probably not 14, I'd say 12, 13, 11, 12, 13 when I had my first experience mowing lawns. And you know, and at least in the US, that's a lot of boys my age and my generation. That's how we used to earn money in our early preteen years, by mowing lawns. We all had these lawn mowers that we'd have to start with the coil. But anyway, but beside the point, fast forward several decades, or at least 2 decades ahead, here I am practicing my skill at stick welding, as you can see in the clip here. And yeah, I'm just gonna show you some of the clips of me practicing fabricating this square steel frame here. And which is a good process to learn, period. Originally, as I started out on this video, I was going to extend the front gate, a frame piece of that, and fabricate an extension. But I realized that the plan probably wasn't very ideal because of the weight distribution required in order to make it a strong gate, because it's very long length. And so for now, I'm just practicing welding this frame together, which is a 2-step process. Basically, it's starting off with long 4 meters length of steel, and measuring that halfway down, so half of that 2 meters, and drawing a line, and then measuring 45-degree angles on either side of that line, and then marking that so I can cut out these 45-degree angles, and then essentially bend the steel into a right angle to corner pieces. So with 2 pieces, we'd have 2 corners, and basically I'd weld them together, everything together here, as you see me doing, using basically stick welding technique with for carbon steel, with the flux on these welding rods is on the outside. So that's what makes it all possible. And of course, with this welder generator that I have, it has auxiliary power of up to 400 or 500 watts, 400 or 500 watts maximum, allowing me to plug in any kind of non-brushless, so a brushed motor tool, such as an angle grinder. But here what I'm using is actually not an angle grinder, it's a die grinder, which I found preferable to an angle grinder at this low wattage. The die grinder itself is, I think it's rated 300 or maybe 400 watts. It's a real cheap tool, but it has like it has a chuck key where you can, instead of like the angle grinder where you have to use a special type of chuck for angle grinders, but I actually have an extension to use a cutoff wheel with this die grinder. So it really, I think it's my preferred tool for doing on the site weld grinds and polishing. Of course, it's a very high speed. It can go up to, I think, 25,000 rounds per minute RPM. So unlike a drill, it's only, you know, accustomed to going 2,000, 3,000 RPM. A die grinder is very similar to like some of these rotary tools, but I think it's much more versatile than a standard rotary tool, like a Dremel, for example, that can have small cutoff wheels and small polishers and grinders. But this die grinder that I've got here, and it's real cheap too, it's only 400, 500 baht, is very nice. But obviously for more heavy duty grinding and cutting of steel, your typical 4-inch angle grinder is definitely one of the most versatile tools you could hope to have if you expect to do any heavy duty steel work. But as you can see, yes, I got this square framed up and polished and welded. And of course, before you use any of this kind of steel in any kind of exposed environments, especially in a tropical country like Thailand or anywhere near the sea, obviously you need to grind it, sand it, prime it, and paint it for to extend its anti-corrosion properties for a period before you use it. You can only extend it for so long because eventually the corrosion kicks in anyway. So yeah, that's why a lot of people, for depending on what your purpose is, like obviously a lot of boats, they prefer to use stainless steel just because of its anti-corrosion properties, as well as construction that's openly exposed. You pay a little bit more than your standard carbon steel for some galvanized steel, and that will obviously be less maintenance, at least for the startup as well. You're still going to have to grind down your joints, your uneven joints anyway, but you won't have to prime and paint, you know, galvanized steel or stainless steel in the same way you would for this exposed carbon steel. But it's much cheaper. The carbon steel, like I said, it worked out to less than $1 per meter of length, and the meter for those of you in America is about 3 feet. It's close to a yard, not exactly, but just for your frame of reference. But yeah, one thing you might notice with me stick welding here is the challenging part for any beginner like myself or anybody out there who's beginning to learn is getting your arc started. And so that what happens a lot of times is your welding rods end up sticking to your meat piece, and you gotta unstick it. So you kind of gotta tap it. There's a technique to do it, and it also depends on your actual current running through. It's easier to start an arc on higher currents, so if you ramp up your currents, it's much easier to start an arc than lower currents. However, anybody who knows anything about welding is you gotta have the right current. If you do too much current especially on thinner pieces of metal, and we're talking, you know, 2, 3, 4 millimeters of steel, you can easily weld right through the steel, and it'll burn a big old magma hole through your metal. So it's striking that balance. And one thing that I like about this welder generator, this cheap Chinese-made welder generator that I have, it's very simple, but there is no current measurement. So your standard inverter welders, you can set your amperage exactly to what you need. So people might actually study how many amps they need for whatever material or thickness of steel that they're welding. However, with this welder generator, it doesn't even have the amperage reading. And the only way I can know, I can guess, I know the range of the amps. So it puts out anywhere from, I would say, 70 or to 80 amps all the way up to 160 amps. It's a rated 160 amps, so that's the maximum amount of amperage. So I just kind of got to guess by listening to the engine itself, and I can adjust the throttle, and so the more RPM I put in the engine, the more current it puts out. So that, yeah, wraps it up for my little demonstration here of welding and grinding on land recently. Anyway, it was good practice to weld now on the land. I've been neglecting, you know, all the other stuff with here. Like, definitely something I've got to do sooner than later is finish this gate down here. I mean, the moat obviously is just a basic boundary marker right inside my land, but getting a proper gate all along here. It's our fence. Use concrete posts, steel, barbed wire, etc., etc. I mean, but obviously the time to dig the posts is this season because the ground is very soft from the water. Well, it's soft enough to dig. whereas during the dry season it's very, very hard to dig without using water, which there's a dearth of during the dry season. So yeah, the best time to do posts and digging is during the wet season here. But you'll have to wait for another weekend, another 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks. Let's see, perhaps a month when I get a weekend here. Not even a full weekend, I get a full day. You know, if I camp out here on my own, you know about that. But for now, I'm gonna have to leave the land, and yeah, it's great to always be on the back of my mind. You know that I have this security in this part of the world. Should I ever need to fully use it? Who knows, the way things are going these days with all this crisis what's going on in the world. You never know when you might need to use a bug out site, so it's good to get one if you can get one. I probably should do, gotta be careful because there's a lot of thorns in here, and I'm walking around barefoot now. So but there is a gawk melon, large one there, that looks like it's ripe enough where seeds are probably mature enough, but I'll probably worry about that next time around. But yeah, the gawk melon, you can see all those leaves, those vines. It's really good. I mean, it just self-sustains even throughout the dry season, and wet season it just grows more. So I'll probably plant these gawk melons along my fence in the front. Once I get the barbed wire, I'll just get a wooden structure, steel structure, where the vines can just grow on the gawk melon. Probably just wood is fine, and just let it become a natural barrier as opposed to just some ugly wall or fence. You know, bamboo is probably a good idea, but yeah, this kind of gawk melon is definitely great. I'm definitely going to utilize that because it just self-sustains year round. It's good for, you know, like a natural barrier fence, and I can do that all around here, vines like that, and it has a fruit that's beneficial. So get enough melons that grow along the thing, the boundary, then you can actually what do you call it? So you can actually process the essence. I can't even think of it exactly. So getting pure gawk juice from melons, it takes a lot of melons. But anyway, the plant itself, it's a cucurbit. So cucurbits, a lot of cucurbits are like the vines. So you know, also, you know, cucumbers, it's melons and stuff. But I found with melons and even cucumbers, insects really love to eat them. But at least with this gawk melon, they stay clear of that, and probably because of its thorny shell outer layer. But of course, a sweet melon, there's all kinds of cucurbit beetles and other kinds of insects that can easily figure out how to get in there, and just so it's not really useful. I mean, to grow those things, it's useful, but have to do it in a closed system, closed loop, like a greenhouse, which I'll probably do somewhere around here. Do one. That's more if I'm like here more, you know, more time than I'm not here. If I'm not here, I'm only here on a weekend or the odd Sunday, on Saturday, you know, I don't want to really be growing too much that doesn't self-sustain. So with those gawk melons, the point I was getting at is those gawk melons, they definitely self-sustain. I planted those like a year ago, and the vines just kind of slowly made their home on the little shack in the back, as I call it. And so it creates a natural barrier for some people coming from this side of the land. They're walking up and they won't necessarily easily see in, and they don't necessarily want to cross there's a bunch of vines, rather than having some ugly wall, or, you know. Anyway, time to go. Got a long drive ahead, and until next time, catch you on the flip side. Talking about gawk melon, and without showing you, so I've come here to try to, so you can see that gawk melon on the top of the roof there, the yellow there. So this is what the vines look like here. There's obviously some pests that eat the leaves a bit here, but the fruit here, unlike melons, as I was saying here, let's just zoom it right in there. The fruit there is spiky, so cucurbit beetles, they don't really go after these like they would go after a melon, which is much easier to get into. And so yeah, I've actually picked this one because I'm sure when I'll be back, and I want to see if I can get the seeds out of it. Obviously, it's not enough to make juice of any kind. You need many of these to get the essence of juice out of this fruit here. But anyway, like I said, vines, they're really good natural barriers here. The leaves, the vines that they create, and so we're gonna save the seeds here. Anyway, that's what we got for now.